If you ever talk to anyone who like really believes in evolution, they're like dead sure that it's true. You'll notice kind of a consistent theme among people, and that is that basically like if you don't believe it, there's got to be something wrong with you. Like you're ignorant, maybe you're like held down by your religion that's forcing you to think a certain way, or maybe you're crazy. There's just something about you that you just can't see the obvious truth. And one of the ways that I think people know this is like by the experts, which honestly, in a well-ordered or in an ideal world, I should say, trusting the experts is totally fine. I actually don't think that's a wrong thing to do for most people. The problem that I have is that there is a complete lack of humility on the part of these people. So if you do learn something about evolution, or if you just have kind of this intuition that there's something about it that's like illegitimate or questionable, and it just, even if you just doubt it, there's absolutely no humility, there's no room for disagreement, and it drives me absolutely crazy. Now, part of that I think is because people are trusting the experts. And what I think most people don't really get is that the experts really are not that great. I'm just going to come out and just put that card out there because, frankly, they make mistakes. Even when they study biology, they have misinformation about that biology, and they're just not that thorough. I guess the word would be credulous. They want evolution to be true. And so they're not doing the due diligence that would be required of someone who's like actually skeptical. And furthermore, if someone is skeptical, they're not allowed to do their due diligence. They won't publish them. They'll keep them out of the mainstream. And so basically it just becomes this kind of self-reinforcing echo chamber of people who just want it to be true. And I think nothing really demonstrates that better than this video by Richard Lenski. I've talked about this before, but he's evolving these E. coli. And he's been doing it for like 80,000 generations, bearing in mind that's like 1.5 to 2 million years of human evolution, or would be that equivalent. And, I've talked about this before, how there was no meaningful evolution, but I want to take a deeper dive into exactly, like basically from the horse's mouth, why you really should not trust the experts on evolution. So let's start watching.
Above all else, consuming that glucose and converting it to offspring, replicating as fast as possible, has been essentially what we seem to be selecting for.
Every day in each flask,
All right, first off, notice the lack of specificity in the experiment and the simplicity of it. Basically, their goal is just to see how well they can make this E. coli survive. And the problem with that is that completely reduces, how would I put this? In the wild, there's so many things that you need to do. You need to worry about predators, you need to worry about variable selectivity, all this stuff. Putting animals or organisms inside of a lab environment means that they only have one job, which is to take in energy and then convert that to offspring as fast as possible. And the problem is, theoretically, that could require evolution. Maybe you have to create new features and come up with novel innovations in order to do that. But that's difficult. Writing new information, creating new features, building things, that's really hard to do, especially if you're relying on random chance. What's easy to do, however, is to just destroy things, is to make yourself more fit in a simple environment by what we saw in this experiment. What happens in this experiment? The bacteria lose their flagellum. They break their genes in order to reproduce faster. They don't create anything, they just destroy. And the reason that the experimenters don't see this is because they don't have the specificity. If you're just worried about them surviving, it's kind of like, imagine you're on a boat and a storm comes and you're starting to take on water. Now, normally it's a good thing to have luggage, normally it's a good thing to have machinery on the boat, but in that moment when you just need to survive in this very one narrow way, maybe throwing things overboard, tossing machinery overboard, getting rid of your luggage, even tossing people over, I don't know, whatever you're into, maybe that becomes the right thing to do. And you survive the storm, but now you're worse off for it. And what Lenski never mentions in this interview is that that's what's happening in here. And honestly, I think it's because he just doesn't know. He's going to talk a little bit about the DNA, but what he doesn't really do is get into specifics. How did they change? What were the changes? Were the changes building up, or was it... There's just a lot of vague speculation and hand-waving, which, anyone can do that from an armchair. The point of an experiment is supposed to be that you actually get into the details and figure out what's going on. But because scientists are credulous, because they want to believe evolution is true, they're just not going to do it.
What was the earliest sort of big findings from the experiment?
The first thing we found, not that there was any doubt about it, but it's one of the most direct demonstrations of Darwinian adaptation by natural selection you can imagine.
Oh, hold the phone. Okay, so not that there was any doubt about it. I have a problem with that. nothing should just be taken for granted in science. This idea that it's like, look, of course evolution is true. Like, we would never doubt it for even a second. We don't even really have to worry about the evidence. Of course, the evidence all lines up with it, which, as we'll see, it doesn't. But why is that not in question? Why are you not questioning that evolution is true? I don't understand that. This isn't a religion, or it's not supposed to be anyway. This is science. It absolutely could get overturned. Any good theory should be. And I think that should be like a little thread that you should be able to pull on to see how the mindset on this theory is very strange. It's not like other science. Like, no one would ever go, hey, of course our standard model of cosmology is absolutely true. And no, there's no doubt. Like, what do you mean? It could absolutely be overturned by evidence. Any theory should be able to. To deny that is just to deny the nature of science. But anyway, he says something more interesting coming up here in just a second.
Imagine. Yes, they're getting to be better competitors over time. It's a common observation in other evolution experiments that evolution in a new environment gets off to a rip-roaring start and then tends to slow down over time. And so we repeated that observation.
But hang on a second. So even by their vague and undefined standards, which is just adapting to the lab environment, which is like the boat in a storm, just chuck this overboard, chuck that overboard. Even by that vague standard, he admits evolution experiments fail to show meaningful evolution. But then you take that with his other statement. Evolution is never in doubt. We can't see it. We can't observe it. But of course it's true. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling. And by the way, I'm not saying this just to criticize Richard Lenski. I'm saying this because evolutionists will throw this in your face that, oh, every scientist believes this. Yeah, but look at what every scientist is saying to justify these beliefs. It's absolutely meaningless. They're going to come at you with no evidence and then tell you that you're ignorant or you're crazy or you're just a religious zealot for doubting it. But this is the evidence. The evidence is that there is no evidence. Now, of course, Richard Lenski thinks that he's kind of being like a special boy here. He's like, oh, everyone else, of course, they failed to do it, but I'm pretty awesome. I managed to pull it off, but let's see what exactly he did.
And I imagined that the long-term lines would actually sort of flatline at some point. And I actually thought about stopping the experiment, but I got wise advice from colleagues and from my wife, Madeline, let's keep it going, and so I agreed to that.
And it's a good thing he did, because in 2003, the bacteria started doing something remarkable.
One of the 12 lineages suddenly began to consume a second carbon source, citrate, which had been present in our medium throughout the experiment. It's in the medium as what's called a chelating agent to bind metals in the medium. But E. coli, going back to its original definition as a species, is incapable of that.
All right, hold the phone right there. He just got that wrong. Bear in mind, this is his life's work. How long have they been doing this? Like 30 years at least, maybe longer than that. And he said E. coli as a species is not capable of metabolizing citrate. Now, I don't want to straw man him. I want to steel man him. Maybe he misspoke, but that is absolutely wrong. And this is an interview that went out to the internet. No one's corrected it. The host didn't put a note in the video, nothing like that. E. coli already has the ability to metabolize citrate. It is built into their genes. It's already written. It is not new. It was not new before they got it in the lab. It's not new in the wild. It's not new anywhere. They just have it. The only reason they don't do it is because it's usually inefficient to metabolize citrate in the presence of oxygen. But in the lab, because they're in a simplified environment, because they're capable of breaking things and still being efficient and still able to compete, what happened was they turned off a regulator that prevented them from metabolizing citrate in the presence of oxygen. Now, in your gut, that would mean that they would probably die, or in the wild, I should say. But in the simplified lab, it means they get to keep living. But understand, nothing new was built here. They did not create a gene to metabolize citrate. What they did was they broke a regulator. So actually what they've done is they've reduced the integrated specificity of the genome, meaning the fact that the regulator interacts with the gene to cause certain behaviors within certain circumstances, that is now broken. Okay, that means they've lost information within the genome. So this is what I would call, for all intents and purposes, the opposite of evolution. And notice that he's using this as, oh, hey, my experiment's really special. Unlike those other guys, I actually showed that evolution can happen. And this is his best example. Still to this day, this is the best example they've come from, this experiment with 80,000 generations of E. coli. But anyway, let's keep listening for a minute.
But one day we found one of our flasks had more turbidity. I thought we probably had a contaminant in there. Some bacterium had gotten in there that could eat the citrate. and therefore had raised the turbidity. We went back into the freezer and restarted evolution. We also started checking those bacteria to see whether they really were E. coli. Yep, they were E. coli. Were they really E. coli that had come from the ancestral strain? Yep. So we started doing genetics on it. It was very clear that one of our bacteria lineages had essentially, I like to say, sort of woken up one day, eaten the glucose, and unlike any of the other lineages, discovered that there was this nice lemony dessert. And they'd begun consuming that and getting a second source of carbon and energy. Zach was interested in the question.
Okay, so there's just a little bit of details there, but notice this idea that there's like this goal-directedness to these changes. Understand what's happening is that occasionally random chance goes in and just monkeys with these things and causes random bits and bots to flip one way or flop the other way, okay? There's no goal-directedness to it. It's not the... I know it's difficult to avoid using the language of design because we're talking about designed things, even if you believe in evolution, but it is a little bit ironic. The E. coli had no goal to metabolize this stuff. There is no end purpose to it. The fact that it even gave them a relative advantage inside of the lab environment was a coincidence that came from the opposite of evolution, which is breaking things. So, all this language sounds great. It's like, oh, they woke up one day and they figured it out and they did, nothing like that's happening. Okay, you're tossing luggage overboard on the ship. You're not doing anything special. But anyway, let's go into this next clip. I think we're kind of reaching the end here, but I do want to get into something that I think is probably one of the most fascinating aspects of it, although it does get a little bit technical, but bear with me.
I had sort of imagined a very simple mathematical model. You can create something called a rectangular hyperbola, I guess, which has a initial high slope and then reaches an asymptote. But they're equally simple.
If you don't know, so an asymptote you can kind of just think as like a limit. So imagine a straight line on the y-axis that goes across there. That graph will start approaching that straight line on the y-axis, and it'll get closer and closer and closer forever, but it'll never reach it. That's basically what an asymptote is. So even though it'll never stop changing technically, it's never going to get higher than that asymptote.
Models. There's a model that also has just two parameters called a power law model that says things slow down, but it doesn't have an upper bound. It says just keep going for time immemorial, and things will just keep going faster, but a slower and slower rate of further improvement.
Okay, again, I'm trying to be kind. I think he misspoke there, because it doesn't make sense to say it's going faster, but also slower and slower. I think what he means is that it'll continue going up the y-axis. That line will keep going up forever. It will never reach a barrier like an asymptote. What I should say is it will reach that asymptote, and technically it'll go as high as you could possibly want. It's just that the line becomes more and more horizontal, and basically will change slower and slower. And I'll give you a little bit of an example in just a second, but let's listen for another moment.
And it turned out that model actually fits our data better than that original model I had imagined. And not only does it fit it better, okay, you say statistics, science, fitting curves, it actually predicts the future. And that's what's really cool, because the original model, if you give it, say, just 5,000 generations worth of our fitness data and ask it to predict into the future, it says the asymptote is here. But then when we get more data, no, the bacteria are up here. They've passed that asymptote. Whereas this power law model, which says things are slowing down but never reaching an asymptote, we give it just 1/10 of our data from the past, and it projects very accurately out to 50,000 and even 60,000 generations when we last looked. It predicts sort of the future course of the evolutionary trajectory. And to me, that's kind of profound, and it's sort of changed the way I look at this experiment and even a little bit how I look at life on Earth.
Okay, whatever. He's just going to get into how he thinks that no matter what, even if you don't change selection, things will continue evolving forever. What I've done is I've graphed a similar power law curve on Desmos here. So first off, the issue that I have with the way he characterizes this and why I think this is completely silly is that, yes, technically you could model, at least in the short term, in the few decades we've been doing it, you could model the adaptation that these creatures have gone through with a power law. So think of it this way, like this y-axis is how adapted the E. coli are, and then the x-axis would be generations, okay? So, and I've extended the x-axis way out there because otherwise you won't see this curve and how it flattens out. So basically, what this is saying is that at first the E. coli are going to adapt rapidly, then it starts kind of getting diminishing returns and it starts slowing down. Normally it would just stop in most experiments, apparently. But in his, it kept going. But you'll notice something is that, first off, a power law is just a model. It doesn't mean that the bacteria are actually evolving according to that model. And what I mean by that is if an E. coli has to break things and, so to speak, throw things overboard, ditch them in order to survive in a limited environment with this kind of high selectivity on just one narrow thing, eventually the E. coli runs out of things to break, okay? So a power law might work for a while, but eventually those innovations, which aren't really innovations, they're just new things that the E. coli figured out it could break in order to speed up its replication. Those things are going to run out. You can only go into a room and trash so many things before the room is completely trashed, right? And so ultimately what this suggests, because he hasn't found any actual new information being built in these mutations, he hasn't seen anything actually being created, anything novel, anything innovative, in the sense of creatively innovative, not just innovative for survival. Because he hasn't seen that, he should still expect that he's going to run into an asymptote eventually. The genome, I should say, of the E. coli is only so flexible. You can only push it so hard before it's finally going to say it's going to snap, and it can't do anything else. Maybe not snap is the right word, but it's going to run into a wall where basically it's like, look, I've broken everything I can break at this point. Even if, let's just grant for the sake of argument, that it's a power law and this thing will evolve forever. Here's the issue I have with that. Notice how quick the evolution is. Look at this scale. This only goes to 10. We have not even reached 10. And remember, this represents fitness. So the higher it gets, the more fit it is for the environment. This represents the generations, and this is kind of close to where he left off. The change is so minuscule. It's like, okay, you're changing technically, but it's like fractions, tiny, tiny fractions of, like, you're just eking out the smallest little changes in order to keep pushing your survivability in this environment. And I mean, honestly, who cares? Like, do you really think this is going to turn a raccoon into a whale? Like this slow, just absolutely poor way of doing things. And this kind of just gets to my main point, is that he's so excited by this by this evidence because he's so credulous. He wants the theory to be true. He believes it's true because of his assumptions. Or whatever. I'm not going to read his mind, but I can just tell you he wants it to be true. There's no well, what it is that he's basically, you'll see this in laymen who argue with you about evolution. They will basically pull a fast one on you. They'll come in and be like, look, this thing changed at all, and so therefore evolution is true. And it's like, well, you have to agree something changed. Things change all the time. The problem is it meaningful change? Are you throwing luggage overboard on the ship, or are you constructing a tower? Like, those are two very different things. Both are change, but one is construction and one is destruction. And because Richard Lenski is credulous, because he is just willing to accept this theory at face value and thinks that it's true before he even sees the evidence, he's really not concerned with understanding. For him, it's really just about presenting anything. Like, if you could just get like one toe in the door and just be like, look, I got this power law. I got this power law. It'll change forever. Trust me. This proves it. This is it. This is the real deal. And you've seen it. This is why we keep having these, what would you call it? Like nothing burgers. So we were told, this citrate metabolism was such a big deal when it was found. It's like, oh, we got it. This is a smoking gun for evolution. Then you look into it and it's like, oh, actually you broke something. Okay, again. And it's like, oh, what about nylonase? That, like, nylon is completely synthetic. It does not appear in nature. And so the fact that bacteria can eat it, like, that's definitely proof. Like, everyone's getting real hyped up about it. It's so exciting. Like, we got it. We got evolution. And then it just turns out that it took like 2-point mutations, and that's because the enzyme already could interact with nylon. Even though nylon's synthetic, chemistry is complicated, and the existing enzyme could already kind of eat it, and so it just tweaked it just a little bit. Nothing new was really created. It was optimized, which I'll grant that you can do. You've seen some of my other videos, I talk about that. Optimizations are not a problem as long as information is front-loaded. But creating that information, we still have yet to see it, and we're not going to see it, and we don't see it. But still, we're told by the layman, that the experts know what they're talking about. They have the evidence. It's overwhelming. If you look in all these fields, you'll be told all these stories like, of course, we saw these fish and they kind of stand on their fins. It's a whole story you can imagine in your head. But then what it really comes down to is like, look, all these fields of evidence all align. We got fossils, we got DNA, we got lab experiments, all this stuff. The problem is, if you look into it for even a moment, you're just going to see this. It's all and nothing. It's smoke and mirrors. There's nothing to it. It's really just people kind of credulously looking around and seeing anything happening at all and being like, wow, isn't evolution wonderful? And when they're not even seeing evolution. And I'm actually going to link a video in my description of another guy who found a recent paper where they talk about getting new amino acids to be added to DNA. And it's the same story there, where basically they're going to see something, they're going to make an observation, and then they're going to assume evolution happened, and then use that as evidence that evolution happened. See the description for that one. But this is the whole story, folks. It's the experts they're not special. They get facts wrong. They sometimes don't understand biology. They're not being thorough because they are not skeptical at all. And they basically are just willing to accept whatever they need to as evidence, because to them it's a paradigm. It's not a theory. It's an assumption. It's how they see the world. And so for them, it doesn't really matter what the evidence is. If you see something that goes along with evolution, then of course that's evidence of it. If you see something that doesn't go along with it, well, then that's just evidence of how wonderful evolution is, that it can do things it shouldn't do. It really, I know people get mad when you call things like faith or whatever. It almost has like a religious aspect to it, in the sense that it's like a fundamental mythology or worldview, whatever you want to call it. That just colors everything. And without understanding that, you won't understand why it really means nothing to say that the experts are on board with this. I mean, I don't know, someone said that basically science only changes one funeral at a time, and it's basically true, because it's going to take a while for this to work its way out, because until a younger generation comes along who can see, hey, the emperor has no clothes, and who isn't credulous and just wants to believe it, nothing's going to change here. But in the meantime, I'm not going to accept something just because the experts say that it's true. I'm not going to just take your word for it that there's tons of lines of evidence, because there aren't. I've looked into it. It's just not. It was kind of convincing at first until I actually checked out the evidence. Just look for yourself. There's nothing there. And everything is like this. It's like this all over the place. It's just people assuming and just taking things where they want it to go. And that's it. So anyway, this went on long enough. I just wanted to hit this up because this really bothers me when I hear people talk about this.